Assalamu ala Rasulil Kareem. Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome back to our third roundtable of this month, where we're introducing you to the various research departments that we have at Yaqeen. And this week we have one of my favorite, I might be biased, one of my favorite departments on Islamic Thought and History. And today we have a few special guests and contributors to that department, including Dr. Jonathan Brown, who is the director of that department. We have Fatima Knight, Amir Abu Ghudda, and Dr. Awamir Anjum, who also serve as key members of the department. So today we're going to just look at really briefly what's happening behind the scenes. What does this department work on? And really, why does anyone actually decide to choose a life of studying Islamic thought and history? Why would that be interesting to anyone? And hopefully, based off of hearing these discussions, these moments, these experiences from our researchers, you might be inspired as well to start learning more about Islamic thought and history. So I'll go ahead and pass it off to Dr. Brown, who is now the director of our department. If you can just share some of the reasons that you decided to go into this field, obviously someone as a convert, if there was any personal experiences, moments that got you into it, and what you think we can all learn from your experiences.
Assalamu alaikum everybody. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. When I think Yaqeen sort of started out, this was like the whole entirety of it. In fact, to this day, I don't really I'm not saying other departments aren't really important and great and everything, but like for me, Islamic thought and history is it's like everything. That's what any other answer, anything and any answer and any discussion is always going to start with Islamic thought and history, because Islamic thought is the intellectual heritage of Muslims, and history is its, maybe heritage and application. So for me, it's almost hard to imagine not thinking about this, and not just because it's my job as a professor, but also, when I became Muslim when I was 19, and I was in university as an undergraduate, and I just wanted to learn everything I could about Islam, anything I could about Islam, about Muslims, about the Muslim world, everything. I just took every class I could. Middle East history 1 and 2, Islamic, Islam and French literature and culture, Islamic law and society. I took everything I could. I just was so hungry for knowledge. And I think the question that I had, and the question that I still have, and maybe a lot of people have, is, how do I understand what I should do as a Muslim, what I should believe in the world today? What does it mean to be Muslim? What does it mean to be Muslim in America? What does it mean to be Muslim? Where's like the line between my religion and culture, between Arab culture or Desi culture and Islam? And, how do you navigate, how much should our religion and our rules change, and how much should they stay the same as circumstances change? Like, these are, big questions. And so I think that not only are they really, they occupy me all the time, but I think that they certainly take up some part of almost every Muslim's mind. Almost every Muslim who takes their religion seriously in any way is going to think about these things. And we know that because, if you go and sit with your Muslim friends, you guys will start talking about this in no time. It's something we think about and talk about all the time. We debate, hotly sometimes. We get in arguments over. And then, stepping, one concentric circle outward, I would say this is the big question of humanity, in the sense that not in a kind of restricting it to Muslims and Islam, but that human beings as a species and as a civilization, as societies, are still trying to figure out, how do we think about, for thousands of years, humans lived in essentially the same socioeconomic, political situations, technology and economy were relatively unchanged from 3,000, 4,000 BC. And then in the Industrial Revolution, people are, our culture, our politics, our society, our technology, our economy, our use of resources completely changes. And, even just in my, my lifetime, since I became Muslim, right? When I became Muslim, we didn't have cell phones. No one had a cell phone when I became Muslim. Maybe one person had one in the, your dorm or something. It was a really weird thing. And now, you can do this meeting, without ever being in person, and with access to resources and communicating with people around the world. I mean, just imagine the kind of ethical, moral, philosophical questions this asks, this raises for us. And so people are just, human beings don't know the answers to these questions. We're desperately trying to figure them out. And the job of the guidance given by God and the Prophet ﷺ is to guide people in times of tribulation and as they're tested by God through the unfolding of history. And so,
can I ask, was there a certain question that you had that it really got you thinking in this regard? So something very specific, personal, maybe it was a class you took, something someone said to you that really got you thinking.
Oh my God! I mean, there's so many. I don't even know. Like every book I've written, every article I've written is based on one of these questions. I mean, and I could just go. I mean, let's think. Okay, I mean, okay, basic question. Like, why is it that, why is being Muslim important? Why is it important to believe in God and the Prophet when you can be a good person without doing that? Why does it matter? I mean, this is a basic one. We have this question. All my kids ask me this question all the time, right? So, how do you answer that question? How do you? Okay, we're supposed to read the Quran, but then how do you understand the Quran?
So,
who do you turn to help understand the Quran so you don't misunderstand it? Basic questions like this.
So from what we're understanding here, then, is that some of the questions that your department is answering in the papers that you guys have all written is really just getting to, a lot of times, just the basics of why we do what we do, sort of what has led to, Islam as we know it today, why it's important to even care about these questions and how it really affects our day-to-day. You think that's safe to say?
Yeah, I mean, so other departments do things that are more like, probably would say like pastoral, in the sense of like really talking to people communicating with them like emotionally and spiritually. I mean, this department is really focused more on intellectually, which I guess for a professor is like the only way I communicate, which is maybe not the best thing in the world, but like when I as a Muslim have a question, like let's just, okay, I mean, like the book I'm writing right now, and for both the essay I'm writing for Yaqeen and the book I'm writing based on that essay, is Islam anti-Black? Is there something in Islam, we talk about, anti-Black racism. Is there something about Islam and Muslims that's anti-Black? I mean, how do you answer this question, right? You look at the Islamic scriptures, the Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet. You look at the precedent of the early Muslim community. You look at the work that Muslim scholars did throughout history, understanding the Quran, the Sunnah, building on it, building an Islamic law, building an Islamic theology. Then you look at the history of Muslim cultures. How do they deal with these questions? How do they fail? How do they succeed? And you look back at this and you find, answers to these questions. And from the perspective of, what Yaqeen does, right? I believe, and I've never been let down by this. I've never been disappointed, right? So Muslims, sometimes a lot of Muslims screw up, sometimes some Muslims screw up, but there's always voices, and sometimes those are really, really big scholarly voices who will be speaking the truth and who will be pointing out problems that other people are other mistakes other people are making, or problems that they are causing. And so you go back and you find these voices, and they instill faith in you, they remove doubt from you, they help answer questions, and they inspire you to think about Islamic history and our legacy and our civilization and our tradition as something that can, help people, not just Muslims, but non-Muslims.
That was a great, I think, captured what the department does really well. It's about looking back and finding those answers only to really build that confidence about our history. Amir, I want to turn it to you, because you're someone who is, you went through law school, and everything that you've been doing in terms of studying Islamic studies is really self-driven, and that's something that is very admirable. So, why do you take the time out of your day, out of, something that's apparently outside of your field, and you dive deep into it? What gets you into this Islamic history, studying Islamic law? And why do you think it's important?
Firstly, assalamu alaikum to you and to everyone watching us. I think part of the answer is what motivated me to study law in the first place. There's definitely an element of obviously intellectual curiosity, and I think that very much echoes, I think, part of what Professor Brown was saying, which is just a pure and genuine interest into discovering answers to outstanding questions. And very relevant outstanding questions. So in my case, I was simply interested in why do we live our lives in the way that we do? And obviously we live our lives in accordance to laws, both Islamic law and laws that are laid down by the governments in the jurisdictions in which we live. So in my case, as a Canadian, I live in accordance to Canadian law. So part of the question that was driving me was, well, why are things the way they are? Why are certain things allowed? Why are certain things not allowed? And so I think naturally a person who's interested in these questions is going to be interested in law in the general sense, whether we're talking about Islamic law or other legal systems. So that motivated me obviously to learn about, to go into law school. But obviously as I mentioned, I live in accordance with Islamic law, or at least I try to do. I can't claim to do a good job of it. But in any case, that legal system and that legal tradition is very relevant to my daily life. And so naturally, I'm interested to learn, why Islamic law is the way that it is. Why do I live my life in the way that I do? And this is not a question based on objection, but just rather a curiosity as to why things are the way they are. And there are certainly some questions that have clear answers, and there are other questions that are more ambiguous and require, some searching. And so I think that intellectual curiosity is what drives me for the most part. And it's not just a pure intellectual curiosity. It's not just a pure mental exercise. It's, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this as a form of, taqarrub and getting closer to him, inshallah ta'ala. And I think that's to a great extent what motivates lots of what we do, to learn about our faith, to have confidence in our faith, and then convey that knowledge and convey that confidence to others. And I think that's to a great extent what motivated me. For example, Professor Brown mentioned the question of Islamic law and how it can change from time to time, or whether that can change based on changing circumstances. If only someone wrote a Yaqeen article about that, that would have been it would be great. But that's a question that really motivated me to search and to learn about that question and discover answers. And not just in the selfish sense where I just want to learn the answer and move on, but to search for the answer, and definitely writing things up into sort of a paper helps you retain that knowledge. And then from there, convey it with others. And hopefully that will instill confidence in myself as the person searching for that answer, and also instill confidence in those who acquire that knowledge as it's conveyed.
Awesome. Jazakum khairan, Amir, for your thoughts and reflections. So now I hope everyone's getting the sense of why you should be interested in Islamic thought and history. It tells you a lot about who you are, what you believe, where to go, what to do. And so this, I think, is just really important in terms of your own self-identity, the way you relate to others, the way you really just understand everything, all for the benefit of that clarity, of that confidence. And now I want to turn to Fatima Knight. You are someone, actually, I don't think I've ever shared this with you, but you had spoken on campus back when I was an undergrad, and it was something that I really had admired. And you talked about, various topics, but at one point, just Islamic history, your journey starting studying Islamic studies. And as a woman, at least, I found that extra inspiring. And so I'd love to hear about your own journey, why you decided to pursue this path, and any memorable moments you can share with us.
Okay.
Perfect.
With my thing muted, so I win that award. Alhamdulillah. So I was just saying, I remember that. I believe it was Michigan. Yeah, my journey to Islamic studies, it sort of happened a little bit spontaneously. So growing up, I always wanted to be a writer, and for college, I imagined I would be going into English literature. But then at some point in high school, I started to get more interested in my religion. And, I think for me, Islam was always something that was sort of special and unique because it was still somewhat rare. So I had a Muslim community that I was a part of, but, in school, being Muslim was being in the minority, sometimes being the only Muslim in my class. So Islam was something sort of precious for me because it was something that deeply connected me to my family. But I think as I started to grow up, I realized that Islam was so much more than what I knew as a teenager, and it was so much more than just the devotion and the observational aspects of it. And so really, there was a catalyst for me because when I was applying to colleges, that was the first year that Zaytuna opened up their applications for their 4-year program. And so this opportunity was presented that, literally had not existed a year before. And at that time, I had started to listen to lectures by Sheikh Hamza, by Imam Zaid, and I became really curious. For me, there was this opportunity there to study with people that I admired, people who were living, who were present, who I could actually, see and interact with. And also, I was still young, so in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I could do this, and then I could do something else. I could do this Islam thing for 4 years, and then, maybe do my literature degree or something like that. But once I started studying Islamic studies, I just realized that it was an ocean, and, seemingly an ocean without shore, and that it just got deeper and deeper and deeper. So, over the course of those 4 years, the more I came to know, the more I realized how much there was to know. And I'm sure this is everyone's experience with studying religion in a systematic way. And so I did that for the 4 years, and then I did comparative religion after that. And then I've continued to study, privately since getting my master's. So yeah, I think, as was mentioned earlier, studying Islam is something that is both intellectually and spiritually fulfilling. And so, an opportunity to do something that, is nourishing on multiple levels of your humanity. It's a really amazing thing. And I think the thing about, Islamic thought and history is that, typically when we talk, just in our normal conversations with people, we tend to generalize, we tend to talk in decontextualized ways, we tend to gloss over things. But I think what history provides, especially if you're doing research into history and writing in history, is you're forced into nuance. If you're doing it with intellectual honesty, you're forced into nuance, you're forced into context, and you have to, delineate and categorize things in ways that you don't normally do when you're just speaking in normal conversation. So I think it's this amazing opportunity to get specific and to add this nuance and this context around things that you thought you knew and understood. History essentially is context, because there are so many ways that we might talk about Islam, or we might talk about Muslims, and then when you use history to sort of add that layer of context, it colors things in a way that we don't typically lend ourselves to thinking about. I think it can very quickly close arguments sometimes. It can very quickly open arguments sometimes and leave us with lots of questions and more things to explore. So that context for me is what makes studying history such an amazing thing.
That was quite the perfect segue to our final contributor, last but not least, Dr. Anjum, because you are someone who works extensively on history, and you've started several history projects, even some books in the works that every time someone asks me, do you have a good Islamic history book? I'm like, just wait, one of these days it'll come out, inshallah. And so if you can talk about, obviously your own experiences, but also share your passion behind getting that message and of having Muslims, specifically younger Muslims, older Muslims, learn their history more.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So I'll begin by saying why I think the history and thinking about Islamic tradition, Islamic thought is important to me, and I summarize it usually with this phrase to myself and to my students, that one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Haq. And Al-Haq has two meanings, both what is true and what is right. And so when we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are committed to seeking truth about Allah. And that is why we don't, for instance, turn to feel-good stories. Rather, we turn to the truth, which is why our whole entire science of hadith criticism, for example, we want to know what the Prophet ﷺ really said, rather than what we will feel good if he said, right? So lying by the Prophet is a big deal in our tradition, which is really a distinctive part of Islamic tradition. Similarly, the Quran is very clear and emphatic, the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that this is the truth from Allah, and that anyone who is making claims that the Quran is arguing with pagans and others, that they are chastised for failing to seek the truth, failing to seek evidence. Where is your burhan? Where is your evidence if you think that, God said this? So in a sense, it is the idea of history and scholarship is, and the idea of ilm, right, is central to Islam as a religion, more central than it is to any other religion. In fact, in my view, to any other system of thought, because the ilm is the ilm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Islam has this distinctive feature where it connects the idea of ultimate truth to the decipherable, knowable truth, meaning that the truth of Allah is not a mythology that you have to believe against evidence, against reason, against the goings-on in this world, but that you can find that fulfillment in this world. So in short, you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by his name Al-Haq, and that connects you and commits you to knowing the truth even when it is inconvenient and challenging. And the best of our tradition, not all of our tradition, of course, Muslim tradition is an account of Muslim thinking and Muslim practices and Muslim polemics, and so it has good and the bad. But I think, as Professor Brown said, that you find in Islamic tradition, it's a profile or transcript of al-amr bil-ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, commanding of what is right, forbidding of what's wrong. But you find wrong, and you find batil, and you find confusion in there. And that's what makes it fascinating and interesting as a struggle, as scholarship for every generation. That, of course, the basic truth in the Quran and Sunnah are clear, but once you get involved in living those truths, you're going to have the potential for disagreement. And some of those disagreements are going to lead you to the path of falsehood, and these differences are going to allow you sometimes the opportunity to grow, and at other times the opportunity to rebel, to baghi wal udwan, to transgress against others. And in a sense, or not in a sense, in a fundamental sense, Islamic scholarship then is a moral enterprise. It's basically what Allah wants us to do, as Allah says in the Quran, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لِذَنْبِكَ. That know that Allah is, there is no Lord, but there's no God but Allah, and then seek forgiveness for your sins. So knowledge is really central to our deen. Now, personally, how I became involved in this, I was born in Pakistan and raised partly in Pakistan, partly in Saudi, and came here to the United States when I was 19. And alhamdulillah, I was born in a religious family. Both my father's side and mother's side were religious, and in different ways, different sort of groups and practices. And my grandmother in particular, Allah yarhamha, was somewhat of a self-taught teacher of Islam to women and people around her. So, and the same is true of my other family members. So I was interested in learning and in Islam. And Islam was not to me an object outside that I had to choose, right? It's very much part of my identity. My first passionate interest was the question of justice, the question of why is it that Muslims are so far from the ideal, right? So the question of decline, the question that on the one hand we have the truth from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yet people who embody it, this includes the ulama or the mullahs and so on, are sometimes so far away from being impressive. And so, unlike somebody who goes into tradition with this rose-colored glasses, I go into tradition history with this painful acknowledgement and awareness that all these possibilities exist, all these differences exist. And then the fact that, I'm in Pakistan, very poor, see poverty growing up. And then Saudi, you see a very different kind of society that's sort of, modernizing and relatively wealthy and getting wealthier. And you see human struggle, equality and inequality, inequities. So those questions were really important to me. The question of Muslim Ummah, the question of how to allow Islam to express itself, to live itself. And so I go into the tradition not sort of searching for identity, but searching for, and I go in with a bit more of a critical eye, thinking, what has gone right, but also what has gone wrong. And that quest has motivated my scholarship, I think, throughout.
I think what you mentioned in terms of approaching history with sort of both sets of eyeglasses on is really important, and brings me to our last question that I want to open up to everyone. We have a few minutes left. Is that sometimes it is grim, sometimes it is tough, and it's hard to read this and sort of get that confidence that we're looking for. So if everyone, and I'll open the floor here for whoever would like to go first, but if you guys have a role model, someone that you look up to today, in the past, or someone that you think of for that inspiration for, whether it's, it's about character, it's about the knowledge that they imbued, something that you can, as you're going through these texts, as you're going through the history, you can look back and think that you have this person in mind to sort of keep pushing you forward. It could be family members, it could be teachers, it could be, people throughout history. Amir, you're smiling. Do you have someone in mind?
Sorry, I had myself on mute. Well, the problem is that you're talking about a very broad selection of very suitable candidates, because Islamic history is full of lot of people who offer motivation and inspiration. But for me, frankly, very recently, one individual who has been sort of a strong source of inspiration is Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala. And I say this, and the lawyer in me is saying this. I think anyone with a true legal mind would look at Imam Shafi'i and would be inspired by him. He's a true legal mind, and one of the strongest legal minds, I think, in human history. I think if he was an American lawyer, he would have quickly made it to the Supreme Court as a judge. He has the mind of a jurist. He has a clear idea of what the law, how legal reasoning is. He doesn't get distracted by red herrings, and that just sort of clear view, lack of distraction, and very clear legal reasoning, and quwwat al-hujjah, his strong argumentation, I think is an inspiration for anyone with a legal mind, and especially with one who seeks to contribute to the Islamic legal tradition.
Awesome. You took a classic. Fatima, any family members, teachers in specific, in terms of your own experiences that you think of fondly? And you don't have to name anyone by name, but just sort of what is it exactly that they represent that you find valuable that you can turn to?
Yeah, it's a bit of a tough question, but and not to sound cheesy, but I mean, I think of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam because ultimately this is all unfolding from him, right? And I think so much of what motivates us when we study history or just studying Islam is, how did we get from there to here? Or what happened in between? What was lost? What was passed on? Why don't we see maybe something of the Prophet's teachings, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, reflected in this or that Muslim civilization? Where's the disconnect? So I think so much, because we do this as believers, as people who are devotional, I think for a lot of us, trying to sort of reconcile the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what he brought in his character, with some of the things that unfold afterwards. I think that's a big motivation. And I think especially, let's say if we look in the realm of questions around women, so there's a lot of things today that people struggle with regards to women in Islam and women's role and women's value, etc. And there's a lot of polarization there. And I think a lot of that polarization comes because we have a particular view of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we don't see that perhaps reflected elsewhere, or we see some sort of breakdown, or we're trying to reconcile things. And so I think there's a lot of recovery that we try to do when we look at history and we look at Islamic thought, and we're trying to recover and reconcile so much of what has unfolded, and how it is either a breakdown or something that really does carry on from the time of the Prophet.
Okay, I'm making it harder for you last two. It's got to be someone, alive during your time. For me, it's my grandfather. He represents everything in terms of confidence, contribution. If there's doubt, he squashes it. I could talk about him for hours. So, Dr. Anjum, anyone that you can share?
Yeah, so there were, alhamdulillah, a number of people that I admired growing up. Maybe not in my own lifetime. There were some as well. My grandmother, Allah yarhamha. But also, I think what she taught me was to question, to think for herself. She was a self-taught scholar of hadith. So rebellion was sort of in her, intellectual rebellion. And so I rebelled against her as well. She wanted to make me to take bay'at to Ahli Hadith group that she belonged to, and I said, no way, I'm not doing that, but I'll study everything. And so I think that was one, but also there were some other figures who in the South Asian context were quite important figures. Iqbal was poetry, was very inspiring to me. One person whose intellectual contributions were really remarkable, again, he stood head and shoulder above the other scholars and figures at the time, was Abu al-Madudi, whose Urdu was, his writing, and I was a sort of a connoisseur of Urdu, and I wrote, poetry and whatnot. So, and he was just absolutely beautiful writing and very, very committed person, somebody who was sort of, would take bullets for what he believed, the kind of scholarship commitment you don't see today. American preachers, like many of them, you get an iftar for, Ramadan iftar in White House, they're all, standing in a line. But so there was the line, there's the people who, it was very clear that there were people who will take the bullet and challenge the world. And he was certainly one of them. I didn't meet him. He was, my parents' generation. Then there were, moving on earlier, I guess I will, if you allow me to go against your condition. I think, of course, so what our sister, Dr. Knight, said, absolutely. I think that the question, the Prophet ﷺ has become increasingly, as I have grown in my scholarship, and I've studied a closer and closer, as I get to know him more as a scholar, not through stories, the more I admire him. But growing up, some of the figures, Imam al-Shafi'i actually is a good honorable mention. But growing up in Pakistan and South Asia, Abu Hanifa was always special. And the reason I found Abu Hanifa as a personally inspiring figure was, if you look at his biographies that were available in Urdu sometime. Now, as a historian, I know that there may be some questions with some of the reports, but I think on the whole, the story holds up, which is his speaking truth to power. So of all the imams, he was the one who permitted rebellion against oppressive rulers. And for me, this was truly inspiring. If you look at, his whole biography, both against the Umayyads and the Abbasids, there's a story in which Al-Mansur builds a central mosque in Baghdad and asks him to administer it to increase sort of legitimacy. And he says, if you ask me to count these pillars, I will not count them for you. And to me, that was always a model of what a true scholar of Islam and true follower of the Prophet ﷺ is.
Imam al-A'zam, Allah yarhamah. And another great reason to study Islamic history, you get to see some of those stories and be inspired. All right, Dr. Brown, last but not least, one role model.
Yeah, really, I was thinking so much about this. I think one of the problems is when you get older, and especially if you kind of come of age and get older in a time sort of since the Arab Spring, a lot of people, a lot of people that you respect for some reasons, you don't respect for other reasons, and there's not so many people around you, or even older than you around you that you have a lot of. Actually, I respect Avamr a lot. I'm probably the only person. I'm only a person who calls him Avamr, which is everyone else calls him other things. I just call him Avamr. I'm not sure what it's Awamer or Avamer or whatever. Avamr.
Awamer sounds so much nicer.
I respect Avamr a lot. I really have to say this. MashaAllah, man. Hafidhaka Allah. That he's just such a smart guy, and he's so passionate, and he's so thoughtful, and he's a really pious person, and he had a big
check is on the way. We discussed this, but you're going overboard now.
No, I'm not. I didn't think about this until right now. I was like, I started. I was like, well, who people I really respect. And then, another person I should respect Omar Suleiman a lot. I respect him a lot. As someone who just really kind of naturally feels like, his religion drives him to take the stances he does. He never feel like he's playing a role, and I really respect that. He's a very
about him, it's just his compassion is so genuine.
Yeah, I mean, he even answers the phone when I call him to like complain about stupid stuff. I mean, he's 10 years younger than me, and I still call him to complain about stuff. I mean, he's and I only got to know him through when he came to talk to me about being in Yaqeen. I'll say one other thing, which was, who was the person I had in my mind? Oh, I was thinking, someone who really had a big impact on me is the Kuwaiti scholar Tariq Swaydan. He really had a big impact on me. I think in a lot of ways his, again, there's this just incredible passion, an earnestness, looking at Islamic history as something that's alive and inspiring and relevant, and also a person with really incredible tawakkul, incredible faith. You see this in his own life. I mean, I was just so impressed by this. And then also, last thing I learned from him, which is that you have to a lot of us, even in little ways or in big ways or medium ways, are looked to be leaders. We have to, it could be something like on the soccer field or like going grocery shopping or whatever, that, and that, you have to respond, you have to fill that role. You can't turn your back on the needs of other people. And you have to think about the responsibility you have to other people to help them. And so I think that this, really had a big impact on me. I mean, there, like Obama and the other people, we could go into figures in the past who are really impressive. I have a lot of those, but you asked me specifically ones who are alive today.
Just a good glimpse into some of the people that you guys have been able to look to. Alhamdulillah. I've been inspired, obviously, by all of you guys. Alhamdulillah. And hopefully it's a good motivation for others to start looking into whether, the world as it is today, but also history, to find those role models, find those people who can inspire you, and really be able to engage in those courses, that text, really with that ultimate goal in mind, that you're learning more about yourself so you can become a better you. And I think if you have that attitude in mind, and I think that our researchers here agree that is what really nourishes that conviction that you have and inspires that contribution that we're trying to work at Yaqeen. So Jazakumullah khairan once again all for joining us today, alhamdulillah. And we look forward to seeing you guys all next week with yet another one of our many departments here at Yaqeen. With that, we'll go ahead and conclude. Jazakumullah khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.